Hey guys, I just want to spend 5 minutes to waffle on about this little component here, and specifically a cool CSS discovery that I made yesterday. So, firstly, why have I done this? This has not been on the design, on the burn down card, was nothing like this. But basically, I was playing with different things like, oh, how can we present this data in more obvious ways? And my realization was that the problem I have with this sort of layout here is that essentially it's disconnected to what we display on our marketing page. I thought, well, if I'm being reasonably sensible about this, I should just match this as closely as I can. And the rationale I have is that if any issuer has studied this and have said, oh, do you know what, that's the plan for me, when they come to this purchase flow, they don't want to be presented with something that looks totally different, because you have to sort of try and correlate between the decision you made on this page and the data that's being presented in a different manner on this page. And I don't think that's particularly fair. Therefore, I wanted to replicate that as close as possible. So, oh, there's medium. It's very familiar. So the hypothesis is that anyone who's studied the pricing page here will have a lower cognitive load on this page here because it will already be familiar. And so, I decided I wanted to jazz it up a bit with this effect of pulling them into the foreground. And so I did what any self-respecting developer would do, and I went straight onto Google and tried to have a look to see how other people do it and see if I could rip off some code. And I was actually reasonably surprised to see that no one had solved it in the way that I thought was elegant, or certainly not in ways that was easily discoverable on Google. So let's take a look at a typical example. So this is the problem that I'm seeing is, oh, okay, when you hover, it sits in the foreground and it zooms. That's all I wanted. But here's what happens when you hover out of it, so you mouse out of that element. Take a peek at this green one. It jumps in front. So the element to the right jumps in front, and it just looks dumb. It just makes it look bad. I wouldn't be happy with that. So then I thought about this and I realized, okay, let's just apply some knowledge here. So what's happening is the initial state of the initial style of these elements is leaving the z-index undefined. So it's falling back to the default stack order of the browser, which in this case, when undefined, is the order of the elements on the page. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then upon hover, you see the z-index to yank it in front. So that's what makes it sit in front. But when I hover out, the z-index is left back to undefined, and you can see it sort of sits in the background. And I thought about this for a moment and realized, well, if I was a games developer, well, that would be pretty trivial. All I would do is I would change the z value to bring it into the foreground. And I thought, well, that's pretty straightforward to solve, actually. If you set the z-index, if you define the z-index at the beginning, and you have a value that you can animate to, so not 2, because 2, you can't have a z-index of 1.1 or 1.2 or 1.3. So that is going to have like a similar problem. I mean, it just looks kind of odd. But if you set it to a value nice and high that we can animate through, so it's going to cycle through all those z-index values, you can see it's going to sit on top and back to where it was. So now we no longer have that value being swapped at either the midway point, as you saw when it was 1 and 2, or completely lost when I moused out. And the other thing is, so you can imagine the halfway through that animation, its z-index is 50 because it's cycling through 1, 100. So if I hover over the next one, at that midway point, they're both going to have 50, and one will have 51 and then 49. So they swap over at the halfway point, and that's exactly the effect that I wanted. So the discovery I made was that the z-index value can be transitioned, and I didn't realize that because I just assumed And I did read the spec a long time ago, like years ago. I just seem to recall that it was pixel values, colors, box shadows, borders, this sort of thing that could be animated. And I didn't realize that the Z-index could be animated in that manner. And actually the overall effect is bang on. It's exactly what I wanted. And again, I was just surprised to see the same bug over and over and over again. And the end result is something that's really smart, and it just looks natural and right, and I think quite elegant. So yeah, I think I've waffled over enough of that. Z-index, it's cool.